Stop! You're not allowed to go any farther. The female flight attendant's voice rang out sharply, cutting through the quiet of the flight from Atlanta to Chicago. A few passengers lifted their heads. Gradually, eyes throughout the cabin turned toward the aisle. There stood Emily Carter, a 9-year-old blind girl, frozen in place. Her white cane tapped lightly against the floor. Her small hand tightened around the handle, as though searching for something solid to hold on to in a space she could not see. I just want to find my mom, Emily said softly. The flight attendant folded her arms, her tone firm. Your mother isn't up there. Go back to your seat. Emily shook her head. Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to remain polite. My mom is sitting in seat 5A. She told me that if I needed anything, I could come find her. A few passengers began exchanging glances. A man seated nearby quietly raised his phone. The flight attendant stepped closer, her voice turning colder. I've already told you, don't make things up. Emily stood still in the aisle. She could not see the many eyes now focused on her. She could only feel the heavy silence slowly spreading through the cabin. And at that exact moment, a calm but commanding woman's voice came from the front of the plane. Please take your hand off my daughter. The entire cabin fell silent. The words had barely faded when the atmosphere inside the aircraft seemed to freeze. Flight attendant Linda Parker turned around. Her grip on Emily's arm tightened slightly, as if she had not yet fully processed what had just happened. A woman stepped forward from the front cabin and approached them. Her stride was unhurried, yet unmistakably confident. The overhead lights reflected softly off her dark brown hair, tied neatly at the back of her neck. When Emily heard the familiar voice, she whispered, Mom! Rachel Carter immediately bent down. Her hand rested gently, but firmly, on her daughter's shoulder. I'm right here. Emily grasped her mother's hand, holding on as though she had just found safety in an unfamiliar world. I just wanted to find you. Rachel nodded gently, then slowly straightened. Her gaze shifted to Linda. What exactly happened to my daughter? Linda hesitated for a brief moment, but quickly recovered her usual firmness. Your daughter was attempting to move into the forward section without authorization. Rachel glanced down at Emily. Is that true? Emily shook her head. I told her you were sitting in the front, but she didn't believe me. Linda crossed her arms again. Ma'am, children should not be walking around the cabin unattended. A man sitting near the aisle spoke up. The little girl was very polite. Linda turned sharply toward him. Sir, please do not interfere. A trace of irritation crept into her voice. Rachel remained calm. She did not raise her voice, nor did she appear angry. Yet her composure somehow made the tension in the cabin even more palpable. She was only trying to find her mother. Linda shrugged slightly. Regardless, passengers are required to follow the crew's instructions. Emily stood quietly between the two adults. She could not see the many eyes watching the scene unfold, but she could feel the unusual stillness that had settled across the cabin. Rachel leaned down and spoke softly. Emily, did you clearly tell her where I was sitting? I told her you were in the front, near the window. Rachel nodded. Then you didn't do anything wrong. Linda let out a short, impatient laugh. Ma'am, if every passenger claimed to have someone sitting in the forward cabin, this flight would quickly turn into chaos. Several passengers began whispering among themselves. The man who had been recording quietly lifted his phone higher. Linda noticed. Her eyes swept across the rows of seats. Please cooperate so that the flight can proceed normally. Rachel studied Linda for a few seconds. Did you ask her? Linda frowned. Ask her what? Where she was going. Linda fell silent. Rachel continued, her voice still calm, but each word precise. She's blind. The cabin grew noticeably quieter. Linda blinked. I know. Rachel shook her head ever so slightly. If you truly knew that, you would never have grabbed her arm the way you did. Linda immediately protested. I was simply guiding her. A woman seated a few rows back spoke up. We all saw what happened. Another passenger added, the girl was just trying to explain. Phones remained pointed toward them. Linda's patience was beginning to wear thin. Ma'am, I think this situation is being blown out of proportion. Rachel glanced around the cabin before turning back to her. No one here is trying to exaggerate anything. She calmly reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Linda raised an eyebrow. Who are you calling? Rachel tapped a few times on the screen before pausing. I just want to make sure this situation is handled appropriately. Linda folded her arms. You're free to file a complaint. In the row behind them, a young passenger whispered to his friend. That woman looks familiar. The friend leaned forward to get a better look. Wait, isn't she? His sentence trailed off as Rachel briefly turned her head toward them. The overhead lights illuminated her face clearly. Several passengers immediately recognized her. Whispers spread down the rows. Linda frowned. What's going on? The man recording quietly said, You don't recognize her? Linda looked at Rachel again. Recognize what? Rachel offered a faint smile. It's all right. Linda felt her confidence beginning to slip. Who are you? Rachel met her gaze. Rachel Carter. The name caused several passengers to murmur in surprise. Linda frowned again. And? A man behind them spoke loudly enough for several rows to hear. Attorney Rachel Carter. Another passenger added, the one who won that major lawsuit against an airline last year. Linda swallowed. Her eyes shifted toward the phones aimed at her. Rachel spoke slowly. I represent passengers who have been treated unfairly. Linda tried to steady her voice. I didn't do anything wrong. Rachel nodded slightly. Perhaps. She glanced around the cabin. But fortunately, quite a few people here just recorded what happened. Several passengers raised their phones higher. Linda looked at the glowing screens. The confidence on her face began to fade. Rachel slipped her phone back into her pocket. I believe the captain will want to know what just happened. Just then, a quiet sound came from the front of the cabin. The cockpit door opened, and the captain stepped out with a serious expression. He said nothing at first, simply scanning the cabin before focusing on the small group standing in the aisle. The tension was so thick that nearby passengers almost held their breath. Linda quickly stepped forward, her voice urgent as she tried to regain control of the situation. Captain, this passenger is disrupting the flight. I asked them to return to their seats, but they refused to cooperate. Rachel did not interrupt. She remained beside Emily, one hand resting gently on her daughter's shoulder. But the expression in her eyes had changed. Now cold, focused, and unmistakably firm. The captain turned to her. Ma'am. Rachel spoke calmly. My daughter was simply trying to find me, but this flight attendant grabbed her arm in the aisle and accused her of lying. Linda reacted immediately. I was just doing my job. Rachel tilted her head slightly. Doing your job? She turned toward the passengers behind them. Excuse me, did anyone here record what just happened? 3 hands instantly lifted phones into the air. One man spoke clearly. I recorded everything from the beginning. A woman added, so did I. A younger passenger extended his phone toward the captain. You should take a look at this. Linda's face went pale. The captain watched the screen for a few seconds. No one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the engines outside the aircraft. He returned the phone and turned to Linda. Linda, how do you explain grabbing the arm of a minor passenger? Linda struggled to keep her composure. I was only guiding. Rachel interrupted, her voice suddenly sharp. She's blind. The cabin fell completely silent. Rachel continued, her words measured and clear. She cannot see the aisle. She was simply following her cane to find her mother, and the very first thing you did was grab her arm as though she were causing trouble. Linda stammered. I didn't realize. Rachel looked directly at her. She told you. No one spoke. Rachel inhaled slowly before taking out her phone again. I don't want to turn this into a major incident, but I will not allow it to be ignored. Linda forced a small laugh. What exactly are you planning to do? Rachel met her gaze. I'm going to make sure this is addressed properly. She turned her phone so the captain could see the screen. You may want to check the airline's email in a few minutes. Linda frowned. What email? Rachel answered calmly. I've just sent the video recordings and a full report of what happened to the airline's legal department. Several passengers exchanged glances. Linda still looked confused. Rachel continued. And to the Passenger Disability Rights Board. Linda blinked again. Rachel added, her tone still calm but unmistakably weighty. And for your information, I happen to serve as their legal representative. Whispers spread through the cabin. A man murmured, Wow, that's Rachel Carter. Linda turned toward him. What? Rachel held her gaze. I'm the attorney who won last year's major disability rights case involving airline passengers. The confidence drained from Linda's face. Rachel continued, and I'm very familiar with situations where service staff abuse their authority when dealing with vulnerable passengers. The captain exhaled slowly. He turned to Linda. Linda, you are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Linda panicked. Captain, immediately. The cabin remained silent. Linda glanced around. Phones were still pointed at her. Rachel spoke again, her voice calm but clearly heard throughout the cabin. Do you know what the worst part of this situation is? Linda did not answer. Rachel looked briefly at Emily before turning back. It's not that you doubted my daughter, she paused. It's that you believed you had the right to treat her that way. The cabin fell completely still. The captain turned back to Rachel. Miss Carter, on behalf of the airline, I sincerely apologize for what happened today. A full report will be filed once we land. Rachel nodded. Thank you. I only ask for one very simple thing. What is that? Rachel looked at Emily. That the next time a child tells the truth, adults take the time to listen. A few passengers began to clap softly. Linda stood silently behind the captain, her face pale. Rachel bent down. Emily, are you all right? Emily nodded gently. I'm okay. Rachel smiled. That's good. She took her daughter's hand. Meanwhile, Linda quietly walked toward the rear of the aircraft under the captain's instruction. The arrogance she had shown earlier was gone. No one stood by her anymore. And for the first time since the flight had begun, Emily heard a very different sound. Applause spreading slowly throughout the cabin. The plane touched down on the runway with a gentle jolt. Outside the window, the lights of Chicago's airport stretched like a river of gold. Passengers stood, gathering their belongings, but many still turned to glance at Rachel and Emily. Emily held her mother's hand as they slowly moved into the aisle. "Mom, did I do something wrong earlier?" she asked softly. Rachel stopped walking. She knelt down to Emily's level and placed her hands gently on her daughter's shoulders. "No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong." Emily hesitated before asking another question. "Then, why didn't they believe me at first?" Rachel sighed softly, her expression warm. "Because sometimes adults forget how to listen." Emily nodded and squeezed her mother's hand tighter. "But in the end, everyone understood." Rachel smiled. "That's right. And you helped remind them of something important." "What was that?" "That respect doesn't depend on whether someone can see the world, but on the kindness we carry in our hearts." The two of them stepped off the plane. Several passengers offered Emily gentle smiles as they passed. No one said anything, but the warmth in their eyes was enough for her to feel. Some days, it takes a small child to remind an entire airplane cabin that truth and courage can still change everything. If this story touched your heart, please press like, share it so more people can hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel Real Life Stories New, because sometimes a small story can change the way we see the world.